Cool. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks so much for having me. I'll be talking about a collaborative and ambitious effort to bring steelhead back to Halama Creek. So steelhead are the sea-run life history of rainbow trout. So just like any other Pacific salmon, they begin life in freshwater streams, migrate to the ocean when they're young, and then come back to those same streams to spawn. They have a very wide-ranging population, and yet there's only one area where they're at critical risk of extinction, and that's in Southern California. So I've highlighted some of the watersheds that continue to support steelhead activity. And when I say critically endangered, from Santa Maria to San Diego, only 7 adult fish come back to spawn each year on average. So some of these other watersheds continue to support earlier life stages of steelhead. You might notice that Endangerment is not represented on this map, and neither is Halama Creek. And that's because there's no steelhead in Halama Creek, and they haven't been detected since the mid-1990s. So zooming into Halama Creek here, we have a unique opportunity with Halama because almost the entire watershed is within the boundary of the Endangerment Preserve, which provides a unique opportunity to do targeted restoration efforts and hopefully bring steelhead back to the watershed. It also has a perennial flow, and it once supported a robust recreational fishery, and perhaps that's why there's no steelhead anymore. But here's a couple of pictures of some folks fishing with some of their steelhead that they caught from the county park. And those were taken in the 1980s, and that's probably the last time there was a true steelhead population active in Halama Creek. So our goal is to turn Halama Creek into something like this. We had an artist render what we're trying to get it to, and it's taken from my collaborator Keith, turned it into Steelhead Disneyland. And so our goal is to bring steelhead back and create a self-sustainable population in Halama Creek. And I'll outline sort of 3 steps, and the first 2 are what I'll talk about for the next few slides. Step 1 is to identify and mitigate human impacts. Step 2, happening kind of with step 1, is to assess and improve steelhead habitat. And then step 3 is eventually to get the steelhead back in the creek. So I'll talk about these first 2 steps here. So one of the largest human impacts to Halama Creek have been dams within the first 2 miles. Historically, there were 2 major barriers to fish passage, which really limited steelhead, if they were present, in getting upstream. The first one here is JA1. There's an awesome picture with an awesome story involving dynamite and helicopters and the CCCC on how they removed this barrier. But this is what it looks like today, and it was removed in fall 2023. A massive effort. Go check out that poster over there. Just a little bit further upstream was this 2 to 3 foot drop formed by this concrete apron below the county road. And what the TNC team did was re-engineered the stream downstream of this barrier and basically built up the stream bed such that that was no longer a barrier to fish passage. So a lot of really great work going into the barrier removals. And now there's potentially over, I think, almost 7 miles of continuous anadromous habitat available to steelhead in Halama Creek. Another large impact to Halama Creek are cattle. And I just highlighted 2 things that cattle do to Halama Creek. 1 is pooping it, 2 is walking it. And they basically use the creek as a water source, and they thrash the habitat and really degrade it, make it really hard for fish to live in the creek. So we're starting to think about ways to exclude cattle from the riparian zone so we can recover some of the good habitat that we know is underneath some of these impacts. Shifting to our steps to assess and improve habitat, one thing that we're doing is we're collecting benthic macroinvertebrates, which Ian Budessa, once we collect them, takes a long time in the lab to look at them under a microscope and ID them. But benthic macroinvertebrates are eaten by steelhead, and they can also be great indicators of stream health. And so we're looking at using these to also see how the stream has responded to some of these restoration efforts. Another thing we're doing is actually assessing the physical habitat within the stream. One, to look at how the physical habitat has changed following those 2 dam removals, and 2, to locate spawning and rearing habitat within the creek. Some other things that we're thinking about in terms of habitat is looking at the estuary as potential rearing habitat and thinking about what times a year steelhead can actually get in and out of the estuary because it is bar built. Another thing we're thinking about is science behind cattle exclusion, monitoring water quality throughout the creek. And the lower river or the lower creek is heavily inundated with cattails, probably because of all the fine sediment loading into the creek. So we're thinking about ways to maybe remove that and improve the habitat and fish passage. So maybe we could get the ice plant people out there, pull some cattails, and I'll give a day or 2 out on the ice plant fields. So most of this work, this effort's ongoing. We're in the lab looking at a lot of this data now. So I hope to come back next year and share some of those results. But a lot of this work was done before I started on the project. So I have to give kudos to all of those that have been involved in the dam removals and the collecting of the data. And it's a really intensive collaborative effort. And Ian and I were lucky to be out in the field this last week surveying for EMI and cattle impacts. So seemed quick, but I'd be happy to take any questions.
Sea level rise and the potential increase in that sea level relative to the estuary, do you anticipate that the estuary habitat may actually persist and go higher or more inland? And that may affect the initial passage, but not necessarily the opportunity?
Yeah, I think there, with sea level rise, there is a potential for that habitat to move upstream. That being said, there is a pretty decent gradient between the level of the estuary and the water, or the marine environment. So it really takes like a big flood event to breach that wide open. But that's a good point. We would expect to see that to move upstream. And that, as it moves further upstream, there's a really steep canyon. So I'm wondering about, how much it'd be actually able to migrate upstream as sea level does start to rise. So it's a good question. Yeah.
I just have a quick question. You talked about reintroducing the steelhead, right? Yeah, is it a situation where it's like Field of Dreams, where it's like if you build it, they will come, or do you have to introduce them yourself?
It's a great question. I mentioned 7 adults coming back each year across the whole range. For 2 of them of opposite sex to stray and find Halama Creek would be awesome. And that'd be our preferred method of going about it. But yeah, it's going to take steelhead reintroduction, and whether that opportunity is likely going to come from a steelhead rescue where they're threatened in another creek, and they have to, the CDFW and NOAA Fisheries has to do something to move them. And we saw that happen in Topanga Canyon after this Palisades fire.
And they believe a slough just last year and steelhead make it up over like a 6-foot barrier or something for Okozo.
Oh yeah.
And make it all the way up and spawn.
That's awesome.
Couldn't believe it. They finally reached the barrier by the railroad and they had to spawn. Yeah, it's like your unlikely situation.
Yeah, I don't think these were total barriers to fish passes that got removed, but they definitely make things a little easier. Yeah.
I know that Allison and Scott Giuseppe are working on all this groundwater modeling and stuff like that. I mean, do you think there's enough water if cattails are growing? I agree with Silk, but do you think the watershed's big enough to support steelhead?
Definitely. Yeah, there's perennial flow for the first 5 kilometers year round, which is pretty rare in this part of the range. Great lagoon habitat for juvenile rearing, and there is spawning and rearing habitat upstream too. So I think the watershed is definitely bigger, but there's stuff that can be done to improve access to other parts of the watershed as well. And we'd love to talk with the groundwater people about, how the groundwater is contributing to some of that perennial flow in the system. Yeah, that's true. Unless it's raining. One more question? Sorry.
Have there been any fish surveys there or just the national?
Oh yeah, there's been fish surveys sort of on and off for the last 25 years, and there's no steelhead in the creek. There are some stickleback. We just saw someone this week. And there are some sculpin and maybe some tidewater goby in the estuary, but there's not a lot of fish in the creek right now. Lots of turtles and frogs though.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, thanks.